Welcome to the Real Estate Investment Nomad Podcast. I am your host, Nathaly Salas, an international real estate expert. Join me as we explore the thrilling world of global real estate. We'll uncover diverse international markets, backed by solid data and engaging insights. Each episode features expert guests from the hottest markets, providing you with the knowledge to invest wisely and successfully. Whether you are a local realtor aiming to go global or an investor curious about international opportunities, this is the podcast for you. Get ready to transform your approach and achieve global real estate success to become a real estate investment nomad. Hello, everybody. This is Nathaly with Unicorn Properties. And today we are with Emily Morgan, which is the head of growth for New Zealand in our company, EXP. And we're super excited. We met last year in Vegas in person. We have another interview with her about the Australian market when she was heading that country as well. And she has an extensive experience, 17 years or more in the real estate market, not only in Australia, New Zealand, but also in the other side of the world, UK, US. And thank you so much for being with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invite.
So yeah, we were chatting earlier and kind of just going with the conversation that markets are usually not that different from each other. So it was just getting your perspective. How do you get into the real estate space? How do you get started and what keeps you in this crazy market?
Well, look, I think if we talk about Australia and New Zealand specific, I think it's important to understand that Australia and New Zealand always have had quite a hefty amount of growth, capital growth. So different pockets of both Australia and New Zealand going up. Some of them have gone up 25% in a year, which is yeah, which is absolutely almost absurd, ridiculous. But that is what we are seeing with a lot of growth in terms of our population. There is a lot of people coming from all across the planet into both countries. And of course, they all need somewhere to live. And it's a simple supply and demand situation right now where you don't actually have enough property, which makes both the rentals and the price points climb. We also know that, of course, we've got some higher interest rates at the moment, but as soon as those interest rates come down as well, what we will see in the market is the prices will climb even further because more people will come into the market to purchase. And again, supply and demand, it's going to push those prices up. So great growth is something that you're going to see across different pockets of Australia and New Zealand. It's also important to understand that both countries are highly regulated, particularly if you're not a resident there. So if you're not a resident there, you're not living there permanently, and you're not a citizen there, there are some prerequisites into getting into the market. There are certain types of properties that you will have to buy. There's a certain price point that you will have to be at. And so it's really important to have an agent that knows what they're doing, has that experience, and potentially has that experience across the entire country that you are looking at. Because for instance, and this is just an example, I specifically helped somebody buy a property as a buyer's advocate. That property has, vastly gone up, but I got them to buy in a different state to what they were actually living in because they stood to make more capital. Hence, it was a better investment. So regulation is one of the things. You're going to have a little bit of money in behind you to invest in Australia or New Zealand. And again, have that agent that knows what they're doing so that they can point you in all the different right directions to get the satisfactory approvals and things like that if you're not living in the country.
Mm-hmm. When you mention regulation, what would be the extent of it from, is it the government or the local state at the state level or everything?
Oh, yeah, both. So different states across Australia have all different legislation, and we see that in places like the US, for instance, and across other countries across the globe. So that's why it's so important to have an agent. Myself, for instance, I'm licensed across all states of Australia. So I have to know all the legislation state by state. And that's pretty important when you're looking at taking somebody from one state or a different country and helping them to invest in Australia or in New Zealand, but you're looking at different states. So you've got different legislation, which means the rules are different, the ways of purchasing are different. Great example here is in Victoria, say Melbourne, you don't actually have to register as a bidder, but most other states you actually do. And that's just a really quick example. The paperwork is different. The way that the deposits are paid, the amount of deposits that are paid are different. So again, really important to have that agent that can lead you through that process step by step so that you're nice and safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think is a license required in Australia or New Zealand to be an agent, or it's like some market
Absolutely.
related?
Yeah. And it is highly regulated. It is subject to yearly CPD points and further education as an agent. So you're almost passing a certain level per year. You know, you have to have a squeaky clean record in both countries, for instance. You know, no criminal activity, kind of goes without saying. But
Sure.
just going back to some of the prerequisites that looking at getting into the market, and it's actually good. These are some of the governing rules. So national government will require you to go through a process where you get an approval through the government in order to invest. And then when you do, there will be a requirement to purchase either new or off the plan or at a certain price point if you're not purchasing off the plan or something that's relatively new rather than an established property. Also, the taxes are different as well. So in Australia, for instance, they have a stamp duty tax, and that is an extra 10% on whatever your price point is. And again, I say 10%, you know, it's different state by state. It's around 10%. That actually goes to the government, and that is a tax, for instance. And it's something that doesn't exist in New Zealand and some of the other countries as well. So again, important to have that agent who has that understanding.
Mm-hmm. And the stamp duty, will that be kind of a sales tax that is paid on the purchase
Yeah,
point?
correct.
And
Correct.
the buyer will pay it, or the seller will pay it, or both?
The buyer and the seller will pay separately because the seller is usually purchasing another property. If they're an investor and they're selling to an investor, they may not be purchasing another property. But all of my investors that are selling are usually selling because they want to extract their money
Mm-hmm.
and invest in something else.
Mm-hmm. Great. So then for every purchase, we have to keep that in mind that the sales tax, which is called stamp duty tax,
Yes.
it will go for both parties, and then it will be accordingly from the
Yeah,
pricing.
so when you purchase a property, you're going to be paying that tax. So usually a seller is going on to purchase another property, which would make it payable. Yeah. So, but when you look at the amount of growth that we have in, say, Australia specifically, and if you look at places like Perth and Adelaide and Queensland, where I am, you know, some of those different pockets, as I said, are going up 25% inside 12 months. That's not really capital growth that you see usually in other parts of the globe. So some
That's,
pretty good growth, even though you've got to pay some pretty hefty taxes and stick within some pretty hefty guidelines as well.
so do you see a lot of people doing, despite the capital gains, like in the US, there's a lot of flippers that they will go buy a house, renovate it, sell it. Is there any, is that common in Australia? Is it limited to just the citizens or the residents, or anybody can come and invest and do it?
Look, again, the same rules would apply if you weren't a resident or a citizen. But with the flipping, so there are certain regulations in terms of capital gains taxes. So that would be individualised on a case by case basis. And it's super important that you talk to an accountant who knows what they're talking about so that they can explain that to you. But you know, they can be some pretty hefty taxes that you end up owing the government. And so you've really got to look at that if you are flipping properties and take into consideration, all right, capital gains tax, what's it going to cost me to hold the property, what's it going to cost me to do it up, what's the agent going to cost me, the marketing, like really taking everything into consideration before you make the purchase so that you have an understanding of what it looks like at the end. And the construction costs here over COVID went absolutely through the roof. They went up about 50%. So a lot of properties that are not done up already that are coming to the market are tending to sit a little bit longer than what they would have pre-COVID days when construction and renovation costs were nowhere near as high.
So 50% more, that's quite a bit. On construction, I think it's been similar all across the world, the prices of labor going up and also material because, the transportation and all the logistics around it. During COVID went up and I guess it never went down. It's just
No,
more.
they haven't clawed it back.
Well,
I don't think they're going to.
Money's
Unfortunately, the cost of living, it just is what it is. And so we've just got to make smart decisions and make sure that we have the people giving us the advice that have the knowledge.
Yeah, that's great. Is there any rule for, let's say, you have to hold the property for a certain amount of months, let's say 6 months to 12 months, maybe, so the capital tax doesn't hit you as hard?
12 months. So if you live there as your principal place of residence and do it up for 12 months, there will be far less taxes in terms of capital gains that are due and payable. Yes.
Okay. So investors will, if it's on the residential side, that if I might flip this property, rather keep it for a year and then finish it up and live there.
Yeah. If it's a pure investment and you're not living there, so it's not your principal place of residence, even if you keep it for 12 months, say rent it out for 12 months, then tenants leave, you then do it up and then put it on the market and sell it, because it's an investment, there's still a little bit more money that is taxed because you're not specifically living there and it's not your principal place of residence. But 12 months is the guideline.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I think it's very similar to the countries we've been checking. For average pricing, I'm sure Sydney and Melbourne might be one of the highest, but what would be kind of, because I was looking online and doing some research and we're like almost to the $1 million mark on an average. Of course, there is the currency exchange and everything, but what would you say is the highest, most expensive city and then something halfway through?
Look, you're definitely looking at places like the Gold Coast, which I'm sure I call it mini Miami. The Gold Coast is just gone absolutely crazy, as is all of the coast up to the Sunshine Coast. And it's still getting expensive as you go up. But certainly Melbourne and Sydney. What has happened, though, which has been very interesting because of the amount of people coming into Australia and COVID as well, what has been so interesting, I almost can't believe it, is that Adelaide, South Australia, is about to overtake Melbourne on the average price point. That's just blows my mind. And then what you've also seen is Brisbane, where I live, because I used to be in Melbourne, has overtaken Melbourne's average price point as well. So that's when I'm talking about the growth that you've seen in some of these markets, they're now overtaking different states in terms of average price points. That's the growth that they've had.
Mm-hmm. So it's not like you can pinpoint the most expensive city anymore as people are moving around.
Look, Sydney's definitely probably still the most expensive city. Gold Coast is also up there. But if you visit those certain locations, Mossman, Gold Coast, Broadbeach, Mermaid Waters, you'll understand why people pay so much money to live there. It's just a phenomenal place to be.
Will you say like a mini Miami, right? Like in some areas, because it's by the water. Will that southern area be
everything's on the coast? Everything is on the coast, on the Gold Coast. Everything's situated around the coast. The lifestyle is situated around the water and socializing and living life. If you've got money, then you have a boat and you've got the jetty and you've got the jet skis and you're looking directly out onto the water. You sit there at night. Like, it's an amazing spot to be. It's always 25 degrees. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. And it's just beautiful. The sun's always shining. It's an amazing spot. And, Sydney is Sydney. It's forever going to be growing. There's some amazing pockets. But then again, you've watched places like Brisbane in Queensland and Adelaide, and then WA over in Perth as well, are just going cute. Those are the three. If I could pick, if you were asking me as an investor right now, where should I invest for the biggest amount of growth that's going to happen over the next few years? It's Perth, Adelaide, and Brisbane. Brisbane's going to have the Olympics. Adelaide's going absolutely bananas, and they're about to overtake Melbourne. And Perth's got like 25% price rises over 12 months. It's just insane.
That sounds amazing. So if we have an investor interested, what would be the budget they should come up with? And let's say if it will be a cash purchase, or if there's...
If you're looking the average, you're looking anywhere from sort of $800,000 to $1 million. That's just your stock standard average. You're not going to get a huge amount for less than that. You can get into the market around that $600,000 range, particularly in places like Perth. At the moment, that's not going to last much longer. But yeah, you really want to have that sort of $800,000 to $1 million tucked away. A lot of investors are purchasing those type of properties, or they're doing major developments. So, buying huge big blocks of land and doing projects of, say, 150, 200 townhouses, big subdivisions, those types of things. So you've got different types of investors. You've got your mum and dad investors, and then you've got like your business investors who are spending lots of money.
Yeah, so that's an average of $1 million Australian dollars, right? Will be kind of, to today's rate, probably 650,000 USD. I'm doing the conversion now.
Yeah.
Because when I went to Canada too, it was like $1 million homes. But then when we did the shift, I was like, okay, still in the 600, 700,000. It's okay. So people don't have to be like thinking it's $1 million US dollars. It can be $1 million Australian dollars, which puts you around 600, 700,000, which is not that bad to be in Australia. And will that be like a mostly purchase cash? The people just buy cash, or what's your perspective? Or people that go there as an investor that are foreign, is there any financing options available if you're not a resident or citizen?
I would always, I'm trained as an agent for the last 17 years, so you'll hear me keep steering myself away from financial stuff. But I would absolutely always send somebody to a mortgage broker or a financier, whether it's done from here, whether it's done from there. Make sure that you've got the appropriate approvals, of course, because there's no sense getting the money if you're not going to be allowed you're not going to be allowed to actually invest. There's no point in that. But yeah, it's a great place to invest. But again, some people, I did a deal as well from people that sold in New York and then came across to Melbourne, but they were coming back to Melbourne. And so they were living in that home. It wasn't an investment per se. It was emotional because they were going to live there with their family. So you've got all different types of, I guess, deals happening coming across the desk.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. So then we got the average price, like to plan accordingly. Capital gains is pretty clear. If it's a lifestyle purchase, just if they live there, then they will not be, if they don't flip it, it will be a different, mostly lifestyle purchases. For property taxes, I'm curious, and I'm sure that varies by state, by city, by county, or depending on how Australia divides the different areas or sections. For property taxes, at least in the US, it varies also, but for every probably 100,000, we maybe have to allocate 1,000 a year and then increase. It's an average and it depends. Chicago, I feel, is the most expensive. So what would be the average price, let's say, for $1 million property in
Yep.
Sydney or in one of the top 3 cities? On what will they have to allocate yearly for expenses for property taxes? I'm not sure if there's a different name for it in Australia.
Yeah, so we all pay rates and rates and land tax. So it depends. Again, as you said, it's all different. So there are different councils in different locations. So different councils will govern and have different rules, different costs, because they'll provide different services, things like that. So, it varies, $2,500, $3,000. If you're way out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, your rates might be minimal. Again, it depends on if you're living there or if you're an investor as well. If you are an investor, then again, you're subject to more tax from the government. And really, that is done so that people can still buy property. It's done so that we don't just have all investors coming across Australia and New Zealand and pricing all normal human beings out of the market. Okay. So there's always a reason why people do things, and that is very much the reason. But for me, it's still well worth investing in some of those pockets in Australia, and most certainly in New Zealand as well, because there's some really great growth, regardless of how much tax you have to pay or, the couple of hoops that you have to jump through in order to get there.
That's awesome. No, that's great. 25% is quite a bit, and kind of like a dream come true for investors, just to keep the property being for lifestyle purposes or probably rentals. Do you see a lot of buyers buying and renting it out for half the year or something like that? How is the weather like? When is it hot or busy season?
Rentals is the complete other side of our market. So when you look at Australia and New Zealand, you guys have people that work with buyers and people that work with sellers, and that's a big majority of your market, right? We are all about selling and property management. Property management portfolios worth huge amounts of money for business people like myself who are building up and managing people's investments for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the investors that I sell for or sell to will then just rent the property out. Some of them will never even see it, and just task myself to find the right people, make sure the money's paid, make sure the maintenance is done. And that's a huge, huge, huge part of our market. What we have seen more recently in the last sort of 5 years in particular is buyers agents. Now, this will be very interesting conversation for you because of what's going on across the States right now.
Yeah.
And look, I have forever said to everybody that will listen, you can't have that same situation here. So I can only in a transaction represent the buyer or the seller, and the seller will either pay me, or if I'm representing the buyer, they will pay me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So buyers agents are becoming quite a big thing here over in Australia. Good agents that have really done a lot of selling also make great buyers agents because they've got a lot of experience. They've seen it all happen. But you will pay similar fees to a buyer's agent as what you are paying for somebody to sell your property, but they're tasked with solely representing you. So their job is to find out what you want and help you to achieve it within the sphere that you want. And usually that is, here's the property I want, here's the investment yield that I'm after, here's the capital growth that I'm after, here's what I've got to spend, go and find me a property, and here's the amount that I'm going to pay you, where's the paperwork, let me sign it. So that's been a massive emerging trend over the past 5 maybe a little bit longer years. And that's something that I find very interesting when we look at what's going on in terms of NAR over in the States. And I think that a lot of agents right now, and again, not saying I'm right, should be looking at the way that Australian buyers agents have been doing business for as long as they have
Mhm.
and taking a couple of little snippets from what they're doing because some of them are just getting huge amounts of deals together, but a lot of them only ever represent the buyer. So they're not selling agents. They won't really do both sides.
Oh, so then it will be two different communities, let's say, mostly seller agents, mostly buyer, but there's no dual
Yep.
agency in
Well, there are. So I've been doing this for 17 years. I've got my own independent business that's powered by EXP. I certainly never represent a seller and a buyer in the same transaction because that is so illegal. I would lose my license.
oh,
But if I have somebody, and I'm definitely a selling agent, right? But if I have somebody that needs my help and has specifically asked me to represent them, then I'll say, all right, well, here's my proposal and here's my fee structure, and let's talk about what that might look like for you. And then we decide to go into partnership together. No one ever hires me. We go into partnership together. So certainly you can have some established agents that can do some buyers advocacy. You've got to definitely find the right one. But more often than not, what we are seeing is selling agents or listing agents and then buyers agents over here.
mhm. So based on the new settlement that a lot of realtors in the US are freaking out about,
Yeah,
Australia has been doing this for many, many years.
correct.
This is your lane, this is
We've
my.
got all the paperwork sorted out. They've got all their businesses sorted out. They're reverse marketing direct to find the right clients, aka the buyers. They've been doing it
Mhm.
for a
Yeah.
really long time.
It just now hit the US in a hard way because we're used to, I guess we're spoiled because we're like, oh, we just bring somebody to a house. If they like it, we get paid by the seller and
I know. I'm like,
we're good for Christmas.
it's like, that is unicorn. That is unicorn. But look, I really do strongly suggest that anybody who is listening to this podcast who is in, any part of America right now, just Google Buyers Agents Australia and talk to some people. And if you are involved with EXP as well, Australia itself certainly has some fantastic buyers agents, an entire group of them actually, who are involved with the EXP.
Mhm. No, that's amazing. And I'm glad you mentioned that because we don't know what we don't know outside of our own countries. And
Yeah.
people have been doing this and figure it out for many, many years, or maybe from forever. And now it just came to us as a bucket of cold water. And we're like, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah. It's like
But
the ice bucket challenge.
yeah, no, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think, yeah, I think at least in the last 3 years since COVID, a lot of people have been getting their license and it's been like a very chill, easy market during COVID. Anybody who was a beginning agent will get deals. Even if you wake up in the morning and you're breathing, you're getting deals.
Yeah.
They don't have to go after their clients. They don't have, it was a slightly easy way to get started. But now that the market is regulating itself in a way that kind of is going to probably put a lot of people, not a business, but not willing to do the hard work that it takes to actually be a good agent.
So we're used to that. That's just real estate to us.
Yeah.
That's just real estate to us. And most of the work is in finding the right partnerships or finding the right clients.
Mhm. I'm curious to get your perspective on this, mostly in the personal side. Now, you're one of the country of Australia is huge, and you were the managing broker from Australia. Now you're in New Zealand, but you know both markets very well. What would be, I guess, the difference in between the market? Because New Zealand is next to Australia, but how will we be? It's an island, standalone island. Is it like more expensive, less expensive? Probably because when islands are a little more isolated, it's harder to get materials to. Probably for
Yeah.
construction might be a little higher.
It's a little harder to get into. It's got sort of an extra level of legislation to it. The taxes aren't white is high. There is no stamp duty there, which is amazing. So even though the price points are higher on an average, I might add, you can certainly get into New Zealand's market at a lower price point than Australia. And again, you don't have that stamp duty, but you do have that extra layer of legislation where New Zealand is a little more closed off to anybody who's not a resident or citizen. It can absolutely be done, but it is a little more closed off and there is a couple more hoops to jump through. But that's where I was born. It's an amazing, beautiful, stunning country. And with everything that's going on in the globe right now, I will say this outright, one of the safest places across the entire world to live in and be in.
That's interesting. I'm sure there's a little green and peace over there because you're just in your own little island. It's not little, but it feels like whatever happens in the world, it won't hit New Zealand.
Yeah, correct. And
fighting over there, war over there. We're just here, we're chilling.
And talking of COVID, New Zealand is one of the only places that has so many natural resources and makes a lot of its own stuff. So they could just shut up shop and just be down there by themselves, I guess. So yeah, look, both countries are amazing, both good investments, different levels of legislation, different levels of taxation, but most certainly you just got to find the right purchase and you've just got to find that right agent to help you to do that deal. Even when I was living in New Zealand, I used to have certain clients who would come across once a year and buy 2 or 3 properties and then just go again.
Nice.
It was beautiful. I would line them up, take them to see 10, they'd buy 3, let's go.
That's a good market. That's amazing. From your perspective, leading 2 countries, right, as a managing broker, what will be some of the fun stories you've seen working with agents, holding their hands through the process of maybe being beginners all the way to when as you nurture them? What would be some fun stories you have as you oversee 2 countries? What would be like a suggestion to new agents and to follow the right path?
For new agents, firstly, you've got to decide. You can't tell yourself that you're going to give anything a go in this life. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean you need to give up for your full-time job and go all in and not pay your bills and stress out. It just means that you've got to decide. So I've got people right now who are starting their journeys and their careers, and they're still calling me at 9 o'clock at night because they've worked till 5 and they're still in there after hours doing real estate, doing business. So you've got to really want it. Okay. And when you first come in, you've either got money to invest or you've got time to invest. Those are the only 2 ways that you're going to grow. Have somebody there who has the experience that can guide you. That's really, really important because they've already made all the mistakes. And you don't need to make every mistake. You can actually learn along the way. You'll pick up some really good one-liners or ways of saying things from just watching people do things. So most certainly go to as many opens as you can, attend as many meetings as you can, that type of thing. You don't need to go out. This is one major thing, actually. You don't need to go out necessarily and spend huge amounts of money on agent websites, social media lead generation, things to throw in people's letterboxes, a million gazillion fancy shiny tool subscriptions that you're not actually going to use. Keep things simple. This is not about property, it's about people.
True. I agree with that. And I want to get personal with you. So you've been in the industry for quite a bit. First, I wanted to see how you got started in the industry, because I'm sure you see new people in the industry and you're like, I was there too. And
yeah, I was actually, I had just turned 21. I was a single mum. I had a 2-year-old and I was working at a factory. And that's when I started real estate, because when I found out I was pregnant with him, I thought to myself, I need to do something else with my life where I can show this small person that it doesn't matter where they come from, they can, they can, they can do it. They can absolutely do it. So that little human really kicked things into gear for me. I started when I was 21 in real estate. It's been an amazing journey. I started off with a company in Dunedin, which is at the bottom of New Zealand, with a company called Ray White, which is more of a franchise. And I did sort of 6 years there. And then 26, 27, got really bored and went, there must be more to life than this, and came across to Australia, to Melbourne, where I spent 11 years. And Melbourne was really I guess, the kicking point. I had done some really cool things in those initial few years at Ray White, but Melbourne was really the kicking point. I started back at the bottom and really as somebody's PA, so I wasn't even a selling agent, and really just worked my way up to listing and selling lots of properties. Then I became a trainer and mentor for other agents. Then I went and did recruitment as well. Then I became a licensee for a state, and then that turned into directorship across a country, which turned into directorship across 2 countries. And yeah, lots of growth, lots of learnings. I have a saying that you can only truly fail when you choose to give up.
I love that.
So
And
if
I
you just keep going, you haven't failed yet.
no, I like that because sometimes we make decisions for our family members because we're stuck in a place and we're like, there's got to be something better. There is more to life than this.
Yeah.
And that inspire you to keep growing and now leading to different countries. And with that, I mean, I usually don't chat much about EXP, but EXP has been a very nice channel. You know, that's how we get to know each other and
Yes.
network. How that has impacted your business, let's say, in going global.
I could get emotional. I'm just pre-warning you because next month will actually be my 5-year anniversary with EXP. And after I had worked for Ray White, which was a franchise where you give away 50 to 60% of anything you earn, and they still own your database. And, that's just the normal standard model across Australia and New Zealand. I call that the yesteryear model now, like the dinosaur model. And I quickly realized, hold on, again, there must be more. Surely there's a better way of doing this. Surely somebody's done that. And I came across and worked for a company called eView, which is now Agents Agency here in Australia. They have 2 phenomenal leaders. And I worked with a guy called Peter Godoris, who was also a fantastic leader. And that was my first taste of, it can look different. I see. And then I actually went on to work for a company that was originally based out of the UK called Purple Bricks. And again, that was a polar opposite model to what anybody here had seen, and they didn't like it. And that was okay. I'm always that, let's just jump out of the fishbowl person and let's do this. And I did, and it was fantastic. And that's where I started training and mentoring. And I really probably learnt the most amount I have ever learnt in real estate between both eView and Purple Bricks. That was my real teaching, learning, getting stuck in as a real estate agent phase. And then that led me to, it wasn't easy though. I think I sold something like 73 properties in about 8 or 9 months.
Wow.
Which we were sitting down going, okay, guys, we've got 16 opens this weekend. Who's going to do what? And it was super busy. It was so busy. It was ridiculous. It was 7 days a week. It was first thing in the morning to last thing at night. And you've got to be prepared to do that. EXP has then blown that out of the water. Again, I say this line, it's almost unbelievable. Like people see it sometimes and they're like, nah, I can't join that. That's not a thing. That's not real. That's
Too good to be true.
too good to be true. But then I log into my shares portfolio and I see it. And I look at my bank account when I get a rev share payment because I'm helping people to have more money and open their own businesses and be independent and own their own data, everything I always wanted. And then I look at the commission, which is 75 to 100%, which is just crazy because not a lot of people over here, they're starting to cotton on now, but not a lot of people over here have ever paid that. And some agents are still only getting 30 to 40% of what they're writing in GCI, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
And it's changed everything. It's really opened my eyes. And now, again, another saying of mine is let's think big, and then now let's go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because we close ourselves off to our suburb, our community, our state, our country. And what I've learned with EXP, and this is probably one of my biggest teachings, is there's a huge, big world out there. And there are a lot of people that are listing and selling and leasing properties, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, and everything in between. And people say, where do you get all your listings from? Because I don't do a lot of prospecting. It comes from my community. So the EXP is my community. It comes from somebody that messaged me through Workplace that's from the USA who's just sold a property for someone that's coming back to Melbourne. It's somebody that I knew in Melbourne who's got a person up here that is an investor investing in Perth now when they need to sell in Queensland. It's, the little old lady that I helped with her bag of groceries that, needs to sell her family home and go into more of a unit style. I always talk about how community comes first and then real estate just happens.
I like that. It's true. I feel like
Just give back.
I feel like that, everybody who I talk to from our network has been very open to collaborating, to sharing the knowledge, not to be like, no, you're not from my market, I'm not going to talk to you. It's more, hey, let's chat. How can I help you?
Let's do deals together, Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And when I used to work at different offices, I would look at what was on my desk before I went to the bathroom to make sure nobody could see anything. I would close my computer. Because the person sitting next to you is your competition, not your collaboration, usually.
Yeah.
EXP has flipped that. And the other massive thing here is there's always been all these little boxes that you have to sit in and all these little like hard and fast rules. And then you also don't actually own the business. They own all the data as well. And the director is the person that gets most of the money, usually. They flipped that here as well, to where the people at the top are in service of you instead of the boss of you, which is just like, wow, blew my mind. And people are here to collaborate rather than compete, which again blew my mind. And they're always thinking about different ways that they can up the ante on how you run your business. I used to just be a little contractor that the day I stopped selling or left the office, I left my clients behind, I left my sales behind, everything was gone. Now I own my data. I've opened my own property management business. I do some buyer advocacy. I was even talking to somebody the other day about, look, I'm a real estate agent and respect if you actually want to go through and sell your home privately. Happy to help you for a small fee. You do it all, because that's actually what the Purple Bricks was based on. You do the opens, you can sell it. I'll give you all the guidance, help you with all the marketing. So there's so many different ways. I find people are quite close-minded a lot of the time, whereas I found my people at EXP. Like everybody is just so open-minded, so eager to collaborate, eager to give away all their secrets, growing all these phenomenal teams.
And it's crazy the things that you learn from country to country, because at least in the US and Canada probably too, people are like close-minded on their country and on their city, not even state. They're like, if I'm in Austin, I only need to hear about Austin clients. Everybody else can go and mind their own business. But
why?
It's like, hey, I'm curious what happens in Portugal. I'm curious what happens in Australia. I mean, we were just talking about how similar agency is within different countries and how things, as they're shifting around the world, especially now in the US, how it's getting more similar to the rest of the world that we're used to seeing. And these trends are like keep changing. And I feel like with COVID, a lot of people are moving outside of big cities, outside of big countries or the leading countries. and the world is becoming more global and diversified more than ever. So
Yes.
I'm sure a lot of digital nomads are in Australia and New Zealand. If you can work remotely and you can live there, might as well just go and explore it.
Well, as much as none of us love the C word, the COVID word, let's just
See where-
get real for a second. I was in Melbourne, so I was locked in my house for 2 years, but it couldn't have actually come at a better time because I had EXP at that time. And
Mhm.
so while everybody else was scrambling about what they were going to do and how they were going to do it, I was rocking and rolling. I already had my office set up. All I had to do was work out how am I going to list and sell property from my living room? And I did. Yeah. And I did because I couldn't go see the seller. I couldn't send the photographer around. The buyer couldn't go there to see it to buy it.
Yeah.
So what was I had to find a way to list, do the marketing. I found ways to do
Yeah.
it.
You get
Box
creative.
Brownie, Box Brownie saved me during COVID. So I'm pretty sure that you guys are using Box Brownie over in the States. Box Brownie saved me during COVID. It's an amazing, amazing platform, and that helped me to do all the marketing. And then I would just I'd get the seller to do all the marketing. I would get Box Brownie to edit all the marketing, and then the buyers would purchase sight unseen.
Very convenient. And I love it because we didn't get creative until that happened. And we were doing things, like you said, like dinosaurs before, until we shift our ways of thinking and get
Yes.
creative on how we can make money in a more simple way. Instead of working so hard, spinning our wheels, we're working
Yeah.
out smarter
Yeah.
from our living room, like you said.
I
It's
just got an offer on a property this morning. I wasn't there showing the buyer.
That's amazing.
My colleague was because it's on the other side of the city. So there and back is a 2 hour drive. So you kiss the whole morning goodbye. And I probably wouldn't have made it back in time for this. So he went. It's 10 minutes from his house. I'll share some of the commission with him,
Hmm.
but I'm still able to list and sell the property and help the client. I do
No,
the same thing in a different state. It doesn't matter whether it's in a different state, a different country, or the other side of the city, the same things are possible.
hmm. And I
Well,
love
with EXP they are,
that.
because you
Yeah.
don't have to worry about being licensed in different countries when you collaborate with somebody, yeah?
Mhm.
So works.
I think we've been sending leads to other countries, like right now, currently to Italy. And I've been in Italy maybe 5, 6 years ago, and but we have our colleagues there, and they know the market very well. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm good in an Australian market, but having a conversation with you helps me understand just a little more to be like, I have somebody that I can refer you to, and we
Yep.
both make money. We split it in whatever we agree on, and I never had to fly
Yep.
there to show a property
No.
like you, even with
Why would you? But you
Australia.
also don't say no to opportunity. We say yes to opportunity, and then we work out how we're going to make it happen. I recently watched Ryan Serhant. He was over here on stage in Australia at one of our big national conferences. And one of my massive big takeaways from him is he talks about how he had to be future Ryan then. And so I'm always going, when I'm going to answer something, it's who's who is future Emily. And so before I'd even set up my leasing or property management, I was being asked because I was thinking about it, can you lease my property? And I said, who's future Emily? Yes, I can lease it. And then I worked the rest out.
I like that. I like that the future thinking because sometimes we just think about right now and how we cannot do the thing that we're supposed to do. But if we go in the future, or I guess we call it our higher self, and she can do it, our future self,
Yeah.
then it's just a matter of figuring things out.
That's how we got on Netflix and all the rest. Like he did 50 or 60 different proposals to them before they gave him his recent one that he's got up. What's it called again? Owning Manhattan. And that's just how he's done it. He just keeps going. So I'm always asking myself, who's future Emily right now? How am I going to answer this question? as if I'm future Emily.
I love that.
He just kept saying yes.
How can I do this? Yes, I will figure it out. And
Yes.
curiosity. I think curiosity is super important skill because people are more rigid. They stick within the lane and never will see outside of that lane on what's possible. And at least I'm super curious. I'm always asking, so how do you do that in your country? And I love meeting people from all over the world. I have friends all over the world. And I'm like, I was in Sydney once and I want to go back there again because Australia is such a big country. Like you cannot go to one city and be like, I've seen the country.
No.
And
We'll take a good week, at
yeah,
least.
per city. So I was like amazed when I'm chatting with other people, just open-mindedly curious about how it's truly over there. Is it like similar that, and we compare notes of each other's country and we're like, we're not that different. Actually, you have to buy your house to live there. People have to buy their house to live here, or they have to rent it, or the interest goes up or down. It regulates the market similarly everywhere around the world. And I feel that's what is so important to have these conversations with, we're in different, the other side of the world, it's 10 p.m. here, it's 10 a.m. there probably, or how many hours
It's 1:06 in the afternoon, so just after lunch.
after lunch. And we're still having this conversation as if we are just generally curious about how's your market, what's cooking over there, what are the trends, 25% increase in appreciation of properties. I think a lot of people have some cash right now in the bank, are curious to know, where do I put it? Because with inflation going up and what just happened in Venezuela, because everything is connected. It's like, do I keep my cash in a cash form or do I invest it somewhere which can yield probably 25% over a year or more or less and make extra with that?
Yeah.
Cool. So thank you for this advice. I love the future self question or the visualization experience. You hit so many markets and you're very well aware how the US is operating, how is it similar to Australia. And my last question is going back to your younger Emily. What would be an advice, or if you can go back in time, what would you tell her when you started your career? What kind of advice would you share that would have changed your direction?
One piece of advice that I got over the past decade that I think is just phenomenal is make a decision. If it's not the right decision, guess what? You're not a tree. You're not rooted into the ground. You can make a new decision. And I think that in the initial stages, I was too slow to make decisions. And so if I could go back and tell myself, maybe I could find my confidence as a woman, trust my gut earlier, like you've got this. You've already got what is necessary. Most of the time, it's just that we don't trust ourselves and it's a confidence thing or it's a fear thing. And so that's what I would want. That's the advice that I would give to younger Emily is make decisions faster because I don't know if it would have led me in a different way. I probably would have wasted a little less time marginally, but yeah, make decisions because if it's not the right one, you can always make another.
I love that. And you're not a tree, so you can move. I like that.
You're not rooted into the ground. Like, what are we doing here? And the other thing that I constantly say to people, because I have to pinch myself some days and go, is this actually my life? Do I actually live like this? Like normal people have to get up every single day and are stuck in traffic listening to crappy radio and don't like their colleagues or office politics and their lunch at a desk. Ew, is this my life? But you can actually custom create your life to suit. And this is not a practice run. You don't get to go around the track again.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really sobering.
Our main resource is time. And like you said, there's no test run. We are in the race right now.
TikTok, it's running out now as we speak. Like, get all over it.
I love it. So make the decision and make it faster.
Yeah, and think about answering as your future self.
I love it. Thank you so much for all the insights, Emily. I love the conversation. Well, we met before in Vegas, but now chatting here, I feel it's more private and a little more quiet than being in Vegas.
A lot more quiet, a lot more personal as well, which is really cool. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And then if people or viewers want to find you, will that be in social media? Any specific links, a website? What's the best way to reach out?
I'm everywhere. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Emily Morgan. My business itself that is connected to EXP is Total Home Care Solution. So we do everything from painting the house, lawns, gardens, furniture, advice, all the way through to sales, leasing, and it's your total package. So yes, you can find me on there. I'm on Instagram, Emily Morgan in Real Estate. I'm on Emily Morgan at Total Home Care Solution. If you're inside of EXP, you can hit me up on Workplace Chat, as we all can. And if you want to email me from the other side of the globe, you can get me on emily.morgan@expaustralia.com.au.
Awesome. And we'll have all your information in the description of this video, as well as in the audio version of this podcast. Thanks again. I appreciate so much your time, and we'll see each other again for sure. Thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Investment Nomad podcast. I hope today's episode has inspired you to explore new horizons in global real estate. Remember, the world is full of opportunities waiting to be discovered. And with the right insights, you can turn those opportunities into successful investments. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us bring you the best content possible. Don't forget to follow us in social media for more resources and updates. Until next time, my friends, this is Nathaly Salas, encouraging you to think big, invest globally, and transform your real estate journey. Safe travels and happy investing.